We come to the next urgent question. Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank you, Mr Speaker, for granting this question. Let me start. Can I ask a question about the border transport operating model, please, Mr Speaker?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Under the border target operating model, tomorrow the Government is introducing documentary and risk-based identity and physical checks on medium-risk animal products, plants, plant products and high-risk food and feed of non-animal origin imported from the EU. Checks on high-risk products currently conducted at destination are moving from destination to border control posts and control points. Recent media reports suggesting that the introduction of these controls will be delayed are incorrect. Documentary checks will happen at all risk levels. Physical checks will initially focus on the highest risk goods, with some also taking place on medium risk commodities. We'll build up to full check rates to both protect biosecurity and minimise disruption. We will continually review our enforcement approach as we track compliance and trade flow, and will adjust our approach accordingly. This pragmatic approach will support traders as they adjust to the new regime. The Government has worked closely with industry and inspection agencies and Animal Plant and Health Agency, known as AFA, to make sure that we're ready for the introduction of these controls. We're confident that BCP infrastructure has sufficient capacity and capability to handle the volume of checks expected under the border target operating model. We're confident that our systems are robust, dynamic and effective, and we're also confident that the inspection authorities are appropriately staffed and trained. I'd like to close by emphasising that the introduction of these biosecurity controls is not optional. Now that we have moved away from the EU's rigid biosecurity surveillance and reporting systems, we're responsible for protecting our own biosecurity and threats like African swine fever.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Let's start by saying this is not about Brexit, because whether you supported or opposed Brexit, nothing being proposed here is inevitable or unavoidable. Having left the EU, we do need border controls, but what is being proposed won't be controlled. It will be chaos. Now, the EU brought in checks in 2021, but this government has delayed doing that 5 times. And in that time, they could have negotiated an SPS deal to avoid the mess that is about to happen. Instead, from Wednesday, for the first time, 2.7 million lorries will need to be stopped at Dover so their contents can be checked, and another 4 million will require a health certificate for the animal products they carry. On top of this, 5 million of them will have to pay a common user charge for the privilege of importing goods deemed medium or high risk, whether or not they're inspected. The costs to business, which we know will be passed on to consumers, are horrendous and chaotic, these charges only being confirmed on the 18th of April. Now, the government has admitted that this will cause inflation, but they claim it's only 300 million over 0.2% over 3 years. Independent analysis shows it will be 10 times that, or £8 a month on the average food shop. Now, if the Minister wants to dispute this figure, will he finally publish the modelling that they've refused to disclose so we can see how they've come to their numbers? Because we know their numbers are wrong, because while they've confirmed that the direct cost of each lorry will be about £145 a time for that common user charge, they admit they haven't calculated how much the new veterinary checks will cost, with some running to hundreds of pounds. And they can't do that because they've told the European countries to set their own standards and charges. So how can the ministers tell us we can be confident when we don't know what will be passed to be healthy in Hungary, will be passed to be healthy in Germany or here? And if food standards matter to you, you will be disappointed because the minister has just admitted that only some checks are going to happen on those medium risk goods from Wednesday. So will he put a number on how many checks will happen from Wednesday? Because medium risk is anything of animal origin that isn't alive. But also it means beetroot and sweet corn. What a mess. Small businesses are going to be clobbered for a fee for a service they won't even get. And Sevington hasn't even been declared a border control post to do any of this. So goods coming into Dover, where will they be checked on Wednesday, especially if they are high risk? What about those other ports that can set their own charges around the UK? And who's going to enforce any of this? Government told industry to be prepared, but they won't check anything past 7 o'clock. Say goodbye to those just-in-time chains for perishable goods. And people coming back from holiday have no idea what their personal use is, so people could be stopped for carrying gorgonzola. With 36 hours to go, we need some straight answers. Our constituents can't eat the paperwork that this will create, nor afford the price rises it will increase. And corner shops, delis and restaurants will go bust, and our ports will be bunged up. There's still time to cancel a Brexit border tax minister. Please listen to concerns across the House and do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the Honourable Lady either chooses not to understand what is happening or deliberately tries to inflame a situation which I think will be of great benefit to the UK moving forward. And I think she deliberately picked on the highest figure that is available. For low-risk goods, there is a £10 charge for those products, capped at a maximum of 5 products. So the maximum you can have on a low-risk product a lorry load would be £50. Now, she is right in that we have calculated that over 3 years we think that will lead to about 0.2% on food inflation. If you compare that to the cost of an outbreak of foot and mouth disease, which costs this country £12 billion, not alone the impact that would have on international trade and our reputation as a country, I think it is a small price to pay for making sure that we are safe and protected for phytosanitary and sanitary goods coming into the UK.
Chair of the Select Committee, Sir Robert Goodwill.
Obviously, as part of the European Union and single market, we couldn't impose checks to ensure that diseases like African swine fever came into the country. The Minister, I think, has said that there will be a graduated approach to the checks being brought in. Could I ask him what's the timescale for ramping those up to a level at which he believes will be satisfactory? And secondly, if consignments are diverted to Sevington, what measures will be in place to ensure that those trucks or vans actually arrive at Sevington and don't dump what's on board in a lay-by or maybe transfer it to another vehicle?
So I thank the gentleman for his question and also the scrutiny that his Select Committee has undergone. I think it's quite important to distinguish between those goods that are coming into the country through approved routes via approved importers on traditional lines and those people who may seek to import goods into the UK illegally or without that documentation. Now, there will still be border control checks via Border Force at the port of Dover to catch those who are trying to do something illegal, but those who are operating within the system will move to Sevington. Now, to do what he suggested and to stop halfway and avoid those checks would actually be a criminal act, and those goods would not be able to be sold within the UK marketplace.
Daniel Zeitner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We absolutely recognise the need to ensure the UK's biosecurity, but I echo the points made by my honourable friend, the member of Walthamstow. What a mess, because here we are on April the 29th, with the new checks being introduced tomorrow, and the businesses involved unclear on how the system's supposed to operate. And that's after the 5 delays we've heard about, huge sums wasted on border control points. Perhaps the Minister can tell us how much has been wasted on Portsmouth, for instance. Now, we want these to work. I've been to London, Dover, Port Health Authorities, extremely impressed by the work they do. But it's baffling that in the battle against Asian swine flu at Dover, the Minister is taking away vital funding as they move the checks 22 miles up the road to Sevington. Can you tell the House, how will food vehicles be controlled on that journey? Because Dover Port Health Authorities tell me quite clearly they won't. Now, the government's admitted the costs will be an extra £330 million annually. Others say more. What definitive figures can a minister provide for the inflationary impact that this government's border measures will create for food supplies in the UK? And what assessment of savings and efficiency have been made if we were to achieve a better veterinary agreement with the EU? In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the British Chambers of Commerce say DEFRA has failed to listen to industry over these changes. Others say the same. Many businesses are exasperated by the endless delays and repeated and continual lack of clarity and certainty in the implementation of the new system. Why has the government left businesses and even border chiefs in a position where they simply cannot plan properly and they're left in the dark, as one put it, at 1 minute to midnight in terms of being told about the central features of the new system? What is the Minister going to do to sort out the mess?
Well, thank the Shadow Minister for his questions and his interest in this topic. And I think what is absolutely clear is there is a distinction between those goods that are coming to the country illegally, which will still be inspected at the Port of Dover by Border Force, and those that are coming in via legitimate routes, via legitimate trade links from areas that have been inspected by their own country's equivalent of the FSA to make sure that those port goods are safe to come into the UK with the correct documentation. They will go to Sevington. But if you try to do something illegal, then of course you will be picked up by Border Force at the Port of Dover via inspection and by intelligence-led inspection. Well, he says there's no money, but actually we are in conversation with the Port of Dover to resolve that. The other challenge that he put to us was that we have delayed this a number of times. And now the reason that has happened is because we have been in conversation with those people and hauliers that have had comments on how to improve it. We have listened to those concerns and now have the model that will operate, given the advice and liaison that we've had with those companies.
Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a veterinary surgeon, I am passionate about biosecurity, and I am reassured that our Conservative government is taking this very seriously indeed. And I thank the Animal and Plant Health Agency and everyone at our borders that does so much in this regard. Prior to leaving the EU, we didn't have the opportunity to systematically check animal and plant products coming into the UK. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that we now have the opportunity to strengthen our biosecurity, and the introduction of the border target operator model actually will protect animal, plant and ultimately human health in the UK moving forward?
Minister.
Well, I first of all pay tribute to the honourable gentleman for the work that he's done in this area and his expertise in this area. I think that moving forward we will be in a much stronger place in terms of our phytosanitary and sanitary protections. I think that's the right outcome, and we'll continue to make sure that we are safe in the UK and make sure we protect our borders proportionally.
SNP spokesperson Stephen Bob.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The continual uncertainty being caused by these border checks is not only disgraceful, but it is also highly damaging for industry and consumers. There has now been 5 delays by the UK government, but with that is accompanied by a complete failure to communicate these delays effectively. So does he accept that the significant disruption being faced is not only a symptom of the government's disastrous delivery of these checks, but indeed of Brexit itself? Any idea or suggestion to the contrary is frankly for the birds. And secondly, will he apologise from the dispatch box today to businesses that have been diligently preparing for these changes, only to be left completely and utterly in the dark by his government?
His characterisation is simply untrue, Mr. Speaker. We've been working closely with the sector and with hauliers and with companies who want to import food into the UK. We're approaching this in a pragmatic way, in a proportionate way. We've taken our time to get it right. I don't apologise for taking that time to make sure that the system we're going to introduce tomorrow is proportionate and pragmatic. And we have listened to those companies that are going to be using those systems to make sure we get it right and that it works. That's why we're ramping this up at a pace that is slow but steady to make sure we get to the right place in the right time to keep this country safe from any disease.
Damien Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend has made the point that there have been delays and he makes no apology for them. Given those delays, will he accept my assurance, since Sevington is in my constituency, that the team working there, who I've spoken to in great detail about this, are absolutely prepared and well trained to do these checks as well as they could possibly be done, and that the safety of the imports that will be checked at Sevington can be assured, and that people can be assured that they will be safe, because the team at Sevington is absolutely across everything that needs to be done.
I'm grateful for my right honourable friend for that intervention and for his support and for the reassurance that he's given the House. But we'll continue to listen, we'll continue to work with those who want to import goods into the UK to make sure that we remove as many barriers to operate free trade as possible, but at the same time keep ourselves safe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our trade intensity has now fallen to the lowest level in the G7, and ITV's Joel Hill has stated that the estimated costs of this new model are 10 times the government's estimate. So I do hope that his department will publish their detailed workings soon. But surely the bottom line is this: the cost of living crisis has not gone away, and he is basically introducing a system that is going to cost UK consumers more to check on standards coming in from the EU, which are exactly the same as the UK standards, and which, of course, already meet EU standards in the first place. Does he seriously think that voters are going to forgive him?
Well, the honourable gentleman says that there are going to be extensive costs. As I said, for low-risk products, they are £10 per product, and I think they are limited to a maximum of 5 products per Chad, and I think that means that they are reasonable costs. As we say, our calculations say that it is a 0.2% increase in cost over 3 years. But he says that these goods are coming from within the EU with the same regulations. There is African swine fever is now moving across Europe, is already present in Italy. If that disease were to get to the UK, it would be devastating for the UK pork market and the UK pig population, but it also would damage our ability to export pork products around the world if we lost our credibility of being no longer free from African swine fever.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister is absolutely right about the devastating impact of not having proper checks and the risk of African swine fever. So can he explain why Dover Port Health are having their costs slashed for this essential checks at the border? And will he accept that the existing checks should be maintained in full at Dover Port Health, and that they are the right authority at their state-of-the-art facility to be doing these important checks, of which they are the most experienced body across the entire channel, not risking these checks at some new, untested, newly supposedly trained facility 22 miles away in Ashford, and that is a risk to this country.
I do pay tribute to the Honourable Lady and her tenacious campaign on behalf of her constituents and the Port of Dover. But I hope she won't mind me drawing attention to the fact that these are separate regimes, in that goods that are coming in legally via legal channels with the right documentation will move to Sevington. But the Port of Dover is the right place for Border Force to make sure that they protect us from illegal imports, and those checks will still take place. The conversations with the Port of Dover over funding continue. We want to see the Port of Dover continuing to help keep us safe and intercept those illegal or any illegal imports that may be attempted to be brought into the UK.
Tim Farron.
Those of us who are from rural communities, particularly like mine in Cumbria, had to live through the absolute horror of the foot and mouth outbreak in 2001, know how vital it is to have biosecurity at our borders, but intelligently applied so we don't damage supply chains and have excessive red tape. But doesn't this shine a spotlight on the fact that we are sadly increasingly now reliant on food imports, given that Britain now only produces 60% of the food that we eat? Doesn't this remind us that the government's agricultural payment scheme, which actively disincentivises the production of food on good quality productive agricultural land, is extremely foolish, should be reversed if we are serious about protecting our security as a country?
Well, Speaker, I'm familiar with the beauty of his constituency. As he knows, I was there on Saturday with the Shadow Minister as well. But what I would say to him is his figures, of course, of that we import in total. Of the food we can produce, we're at 72%. That's why the Prime Minister has also recognised that challenge, and that we're going to now introduce a food security index, that we can monitor this going forward to make sure that the policies the government follows do drive farmers to increase their productivity and increase their production. I have full confidence in our ability of our farmers to continue to produce top quality British food and to continue to expand their productivity and keep the country well fed.
Well, Mr. Speaker, these changes are required under the WTO rules and are about keeping us safe from disease threats. But in terms of practicality, how will this work in particular for mixed loads to reduce the cost of business and therefore for consumers?
That's a really important question that the Honourable Gentleman, my honourable friend, asks, and that's why we've capped, particularly to help and support SMEs, we have capped the maximum of charges to 5 per per load, and as I say, for those of medium risk, that's £10, a maximum of £50 per load. That is specifically aimed at helping and supporting SMEs who are importing food into the UK.
Christopher Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What has the government got against the £6.2 billion floristry industry in this country, which employs 240,000 people, 7 times as many as we have dentists in this country, many of them working in small businesses, family businesses, on very small margins? Why did the government do absolutely no impact assessment when it increased the cost for those bringing in chrysanthemums, dianthus, solidago, orchids and gypsophila to £500 and introduce severe delays on products that need to be at market by 9 o'clock in the morning? Weddings, funerals, Mother's Day and Valentine's. Is there any family event that won't feel the dead hand of this government?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman is right to highlight how important that sector is to the UK economy. That's why we want to protect those who are growing flowers here in the UK from any diseases that may be imported via products that have not come through the right channels with the right documentation. We want to keep the growing sector in the UK safe from any of those diseases. That's why we're introducing these checks.
Samuel Wilson.
The border operating model will not apply on trade between Northern Ireland and GB. Those trade routes are exempt from that. But given the record that there has been of dodgy products being manufactured in the Irish Republic and being brought through Northern Ireland into GB, can he give an assurance that should that route be used either by Republic of Ireland producers or other EU producers, that he will not be installing checks on Northern Ireland to GB trade, which is so important to the Northern Ireland food industry and the Northern Ireland economy?
Well, of course, we recognise how important the Northern Ireland economy is. We want to make sure that Northern Ireland feels part of the United Kingdom. We'll do everything we can to try and limit any impact. And as he identified, there is no current timescale for introduction of how we're going to monitor and work with those who are moving goods across from that part of the United Kingdom. We want to make sure that that does not become a backdoor route, and we continue to have conversations with those authorities in that part of the world.
On the subject of backdoor routes, would my right honourable friend be able to tell us when the border control points for the Welsh ports that connect to the EU through the Republic of Ireland will be operational?
I'm not able to give him a date at this moment in time, but we are in detailed conversations, particularly with the port of Holyhead, which is a very important port in the UK, and we'll, as soon as we have a date, I'll be able to update him from this dispatch box.
Oil.
The Minister says this policy will benefit Britain, but Centre for Economic Performance says our food prices are already 30% higher due to Brexit. An independent analysis says this government approach will cost another £2.9 billion. So can the Minister tell us why he's ignoring British business estimates on this issue and why he's hitting British customers with another Tory tax at this difficult time?
Well, as he will be aware of my previous answers, we're working very hard to make sure that we keep UK food producers free from disease, both plant disease and animal diseases. That's why we're introducing these checks in a proportionate way, in a way that doesn't impact on business. That's why we've limited the amount of charges that can be introduced to 5 per lorry load. That's why we've made sure those fees are set at only £10 for medium risk products, and that's why we'll continue to work with industry to make sure that we have a proportionate approach that doesn't actually take cash away from businesses but only recovers the cost of making sure we're kept safe as a country.
Kitchen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister answer why the Government has refused to implement a tonnage-based approach as the EU does, which would support small and medium-sized importers, particularly in Wellingborough, risking them being put out of business? To avoid this, will he adopt measures to mitigate this such as ensuring all SME importers can join the Trusted Trade scheme?
We did, thank you everybody for a question. We did actually look at different models. We could, of course, have adopted a model as a third country to the EU. That would have given significant cost to those wishing to import food across the channel. We also looked at adopting the EU's model. That again would have cost way more than the model which we're introducing. And the model that we are now rolling out as of tomorrow is the most pragmatic and the best model that we've been able to develop, working with those in the sector and listening to their advice.
Mr. Roberts.
Food prices are 30% higher than they were 3 years ago, and independent estimates reckon that new border checks are equivalent to adding 10% tariff to imports. What assessment has he made of the impact that border checks will have on Welsh household living standards, where 1 in every 4 adults has been skipping meals to make ends meet?
I'd say to the Honourable Lady, actually, the biggest danger to an increase in food prices in Wales is taking 20% of land out of production away from Welsh farmers and imposing top-down approach to those farmers in Wales. And I would hope that she'll rethink her support of the Welsh Government's disastrous proposals that will drive thousands of people out of Welsh agriculture.
Ready.
The direct result of all of this is that small businesses will close, jobs will be lost and consumer choice will be reduced. And that's the exact opposite of what Brexit was supposed to achieve, isn't it?
Well, I don't accept his characterisation at all of what he's suggesting. Actually, this is about a pragmatic approach to keeping the country safe from animal and plant diseases, but at the same time allowing the free flow of trade via a model whereby people can get certification away from the ports to make sure they are importing products, but stamping down on those who want to act illegally.
Mother Morgan.
Speaker, obviously these controls will introduce additional logistical steps which are problematic for time-critical products. I recently met with Main Crop Potatoes Limited in my constituency. They trade potatoes to producers, so they have a deadline to hit on those production lines, and they'll be importing more this year because of the disastrous potato harvest. Can the Minister provide any reassurance that that process is going to be streamlined enough that they're still going to be able to move their goods around in a really timely way?
Speaker, I draw attention to my declaration of interest in the Register of Members' interest, but what I would say to her is that's exactly what we want to try and achieve, to make sure that flow of trade, particularly in goods like potatoes, flow across the channel as freely as possible, but we protect ourselves from diseases like brown rot that could be devastating to the UK potato production.
Stephen Farray.
Thank you. Could the Minister set out the Government's current policy towards a comprehensive UK-EU veterinary agreement, and what, if anything, is happening in terms of any negotiations in that regard? Surely this would be a huge win for consumers and producers right across the UK, and would also have the added bonus of further reducing the level of checks required in agri-food movements across the Irish Sea.
I don't think that would actually include veterinary meds if we were to reach that. But of course, we continue to have conversations with our friends in the EU to remove as many barriers as possible. We have a strong interest in making sure that the farmers and vets in Northern Ireland continue to get adequate supplies of medicine, and we will work with our friends in the EU to unblock as many of those barriers as possible.
Jonathan Edwards, final question.
My understanding is that the Minister was opposed to Brexit in 2016, and I suppose one of the reasons, or I presume one of the reasons for that, is that he opposes red tape. Doesn't this measure and others indicate that Brexit, as feared, is turning into the biggest chapter of red tape in UK economic history?
Well, I'm a strong believer in democracy, Mr. Speaker. I think the Brexit debate was one which was settled by the great British public. They voted to leave the European Union, and now I want to embrace the opportunities that brings the UK, and we will, as a government, continue to work tirelessly to make sure that we make Brexit work for the UK and seize those opportunities that come our way.